The Detroit Lions coaching staff got better this offseason, and that's not something that a lot of Lions fans were expecting to say. After an offseason that had the Detroit Lions losing so many great coaching candidates, everything from Ben Johnson at offensive coordinator, Aaron Glenn at defensive coordinator, Terrell Williams at defensive line coach, Tanner Engstrom as the pass game coordinator, they lost so many young, talented coaches to other trees and other programs that a lot of people thought the Detroit Lions were in line for a massive recession. They thought the Lions were going to go from one of the best offenses in football and one of the best defenses in football before injuries to regress back to where they were before, regress back to being one of the worst teams in the NFL, to wasting a lot of talent and not having the coaching staff to put that talent to good use. Well, just under a month later, the Detroit Lions can safely say that will not be the case, as they have not only replaced sufficiently every single coach that left this offseason, but in many circumstances, the Detroit Lions upgraded at a majority of their coaching staff positions. And personally, I think they're going to be even better next year than they were to end the season in 2024. So, taking a look at some of the guys that they hired before we go in depth, their list is quite long as they lost a number of coaches. John Morton is the new offensive coordinator, Kelvin Shepard, the new defensive coordinator, Casey Rogers, the new defensive line coach coming over from Tampa Bay. Tashard Choice, the newest hiring of the Detroit Lions, is going to be the running backs coach, reuniting with Jahmyr Gibbs from his time at Georgia Tech. David Shaw, the former Stanford head coach, comes in as the pass game coordinator, as well as so many other promotions. Sean Dion Hamilton got promoted to linebackers coach. There are so many different positional coaches, so many different coordinators that are getting their opportunity here in Detroit. And honestly, most of them are very experienced. Most of the coaches the Detroit Lions hired weren't just elevations. They weren't just, oh, these are the guys that are here, so let's raise them up. Every single one of these coaching hires was meticulous. It was thought out. They fit together really, really well as a staff. And I think at the very worst, they're going to be able to keep the ball rolling, keep the momentum going forward of where they were a season ago. So let's talk about each and every one of them a little bit more in depth, starting off with John Morton. Now, John Morton was the New York Jets offensive coordinator in 2017. And while statistically you look at that team and you say, not a great football team. They were, I believe, 28th in total offense. They were somewhere in the mid 20s in terms of scoring. They did not have a good year. The talent that John Morton had to work with wasn't very good. You had Josh McCown at quarterback, Bilal Powell at running back, Jermaine Kearse and Robbie Anderson as your two wide receivers. The offense, from a talent perspective, wasn't going to match up with a lot of NFL teams, and that's why you see the numbers not looking very good. But if you look at the individual players, what they've accomplished in their career, and then what they did with John Morton, it becomes a little bit more exciting. You look at the career highs of all of these players. Josh McCown saw a career high in yards and touchdowns in 2017. Bilal Powell saw a career high in yards and touchdowns. Robbie Anderson, second career high in yards and first in touchdowns. Jermaine Kearse, a career high in yards and touchdowns, as well as their tight end Jenkins, who saw a career high in receiving yards that season. Every single starter on that offense, despite most of them not playing the entire season, all 17 games or all 16 games at that point, saw career highs. They saw some of the best football they had ever played because John Morton is a good He's been in the NFL for a very long time. He's a well-respected coach. And even though things didn't work out in New York, there were some rumors that personalities really didn't fit together, that he clashed with some of the players, that he clashed with some of the coaching staff. That didn't change a whole lot of his career trajectory. He took a step back for sure, but he still moved around the NFL. He was with the Detroit Lions in 2022. He's a member of the Sean Payton coaching tree. He was the pass game coordinator in Denver last season that saw Bo Nix put up a great rookie season of 3,700 passing yards and 29 touchdowns. He was here in Ben Johnson's first year as an offensive coordinator, helped construct and architect the offense that Ben Johnson would go on to call for 3 straight seasons in Detroit. And overall, he is a good offensive mind. Everywhere he goes, the pass game seems to work. Everywhere he goes, the offense seems to run more efficiently than before he was there. And while it's going to be really tough to replace Ben Johnson, right? It's going to be tough to replace an offense that just finished as the 4th highest scoring offense of all time. An offense that was the highest highest scoring offense in the 17-game era. And as far as points per game go, a team that just finished outside the top 12 of the highest scoring teams points per game wise in NFL history. That is going to be tough to replace. But if you consider that he comes in and gets a career high of yards and touchdowns out of Jared Goff, Jahmyr Gibbs, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jameson Williams, Sam Laporta, this offense is going to be nearly impossible to stop. And while those expectations are a little bit too high, you can't expect a career high out of every single one of these players, especially the elite ones that have already been all pros and are already at the top of their game. If he can bring Jahmyr Gibbs to another level, he can bring Jared Goff to another level, if he can bring Sam Laporta up to another level from where he was in his first 2 seasons and keep Amon-Ra the same, bring Jameson Williams a little bit farther than Ben Johnson was able to, this offense is not only going to be as good as last year, but they have the potential and the talent to be even better as an offense than they were a season ago. And I think that's really exciting for Lions fans because as good as Ben Johnson was, he had his flaws. He passed the ball a little too much at times. He got a little too creative at times. He got a little too, fancy with some things at times. And there are times where that's appropriate. And then there are times where you just have to run the football. And the playoff game was a prime example of it. I think John Morton has a little bit more experience than Ben Johnson across the NFL. I think he's been around the NFL in the older ages when running the ball was important. And I do think that John Morton will bring in a few more passing concepts than what Ben Johnson had originally, but he'll build off what Ben Johnson had. He'll call a very similar offense, and an offense that's already worked for 3 straight seasons. Building upon that can only be good for the Detroit Lions. The terminology will be very similar. The concepts will be very similar. And I would imagine the play calling will be really, really similar to what the Lions had a season ago. And I think that's all you can really ask out of the offensive coordinator hire. Kelvin Shepherd, a coach that did rise through the Detroit Lions rank, an interior signing, a guy that started with the Detroit Lions in 2021, was the outside linebackers coach, promoted in 2022 to the all-around linebackers coach, and then, of course, this offseason being promoted to the defensive coordinator role. This is a job that I have been calling for since 2023. When the Lions went down to the Senior Bowl, they went down to Mobile, Alabama. Kelvin Shepherd was the interim defensive coordinator. He was the guy that the Lions trusted. He was the guy that the Lions wanted to promote in that situation. And ever since then, he has seemingly been the guy that was groomed for this position over the last 3 seasons. He's been great as a linebackers coach. He's gotten career highs out of Alex Anzalone, career years out of Jack Campbell as he develops as a player. He's gotten great play out of Malcolm Rodriguez, out of Derek Barnes, out of Jalen Reeves-Maybin, out of so many great linebackers to come through Detroit. And all of them seem to be productive under the tutelage of Kelvin Shepherd. Now, he grew up in the NFL as far as his coaching career under Aaron Glenn, right? He came up through the coaching ranks and is going to likely call a similar defense to what Aaron Glenn did. It's going to be man heavy. It's going to be focused on physicality. He's going to ask the DBs to do a lot of physical things at the line of scrimmage. And as much as a lot of people will look at that and say, that's not very good for the Lions, their defense wasn't that good last season. Up even through week 11, the Detroit Lions defense was ranked as the best defense in football. Even after the Aiden Hutchinson injury, even after some of the major blows that they suffered as a football team, they were the #1 defense in football from DVOA from weeks 1 through 11. Almost the entire first 2/3 of the season, they were one of the best defenses in football. If they can stay even just a little bit healthier this season, the defense statistically is going to take a massive jump. And as long as Aaron Glenn left a little bit of this philosophy behind, if he leaves just a little bit of the scheme and Kelvin Shepherd can pick that up and run with it and call games just a little bit better, and Aaron Glenn was able to do, I think the Detroit Lions defense should not only be just as good, but could take a significant step forward with all of the talent that they have returning that will actually be healthy this year. Casey Rogers is a coach that I'm really excited for the Detroit Lions to bring in. It sucks to lose Terrell Williams, one of the best defensive line coaches in football. But Casey Rogers has been around. He's done a lot of good things in the NFL, and even going back to 2019, where he started as the defensive line coach for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they've had nothing but success from that unit over the last half decade. He was there when they won a Super Bowl. He got career years out of Shaq Barrett. He coached Jason Pierre-Paul, Ndamukong Suh, and most recently coached Vita Vea, who was a Pro Bowler, Kalijah Cansey, who's a great young star, Logan Hall, who last year had 6 sacks for the Buccaneers. He's coached a lot of good quality players. And even though he's never coached an Aiden Hutchinson, even though he's never coached I'd say a Lee McNeil, him and Vita Vea are very different players, but he's coached great defensive tackles in the past. I'm really excited to see what he can do for Aiden Hutchinson's development. I'm really excited to see what he can do for maybe Josh Pascal's development. Maybe he can get Pascal to be a 5.5, 6 sack player like Logan Hall was. I think he's going to be really good for the Detroit Lions. I think he brings exactly what Terrell Williams did. And I think he's going to be really, really solid for the Lions moving forward. You're not going to see a lot of regression from that defensive line. And if anything, you're going to see some of the other role players be even better. You're going to see Lee McNeil take a bit of a jump. You're going to see maybe DJ Reader take a bit of a jump. Josh Pascal, a young player that could take a leap. And of course, if the Detroit Lions sign a rookie, if they draft a couple of young players, they are going to need developing. And Casey Rogers has shown the ability to do that over and over and over again throughout his NFL career. Tashad Choice is a very recent hire. Was actually signed just yesterday for the Detroit Lions coaching staff, as he will take over responsibilities as the running backs coach, kicking Scotty Montgomery to be the wide receivers coach as well as the assistant head coach. Now, this is a hiring that I don't think a lot of people saw coming. They didn't see Scotty Montgomery being moved around in this coaching staff, but I think it's a really good decision. Montgomery has experience at every single level of the offense, from quarterbacks to wide receivers to running backs to tight ends. He's been an offensive coordinator at the collegiate level, so there is nothing stopping him from coaching the wide receivers to be really good next season. But Tashard Choice is a fantastic running back coach. And over the last 5 to 6 years, he's coached some of the best young running backs in the NFL. He was the running backs coach that recruited Jahmyr Gibbs out of high school, was one of the biggest reasons Jahmyr Gibbs went to Georgia Tech. He had 28 collegiate D1 offers out of college or out of high school. He could have gone to some of the best programs in the country, but Coach Choice was the reason he chose Georgia Tech. When Choice left, so did Jahmyr Gibbs. He went to Alabama. He went on to become a first-round pick, and Choice went on to Texas, where he would coach Bijan Robinson, Roshan Johnson, Jonathan Brooks, and so many other really good Texas running backs over the last 3 to 4 seasons. And everywhere that Tashard Choice goes, running backs tend to follow. He is great with the running backs. He is great with Jahmyr Gibbs. Him and Gibbs have an amazing chemistry already. He's going to fit in great with Sonic and Knuckles. He's going to fit in great with Sione Vaki. If Craig Reynolds returns, he's going to fit in great with that guy. He's a great personality. He's a great coach. He gets the best out of his running backs. And I think this was a fantastic under-the-radar hiring for the Detroit Lions. For one, familiarity, but two, just looking at the recent track record, this guy knows how to coach running backs. And I'm so excited to see what Jahmyr Gibbs can put on the field with his old running backs coach returning and getting the most out of him yet again. And then the last coach we're going to talk about today is David Shaw. Again, a coach that I don't think a lot of people saw coming, but a coach that makes a lot of sense for the Detroit Lions, a coach that even just 3-4 years ago was talked about as a potential head coaching candidate in the NFL, and for good reason. Coach Shaw is a 4-time Pac-12 Coach of the Year, a 96-54 record as the head coach of the Stanford Cardinals, and even though his tenure had a rough ending and he took a year off in 2024, he is a well-respected coach, has great pass game philosophies, and I think him and John Morton putting their minds together can only be great for the Detroit Lions. I think he is a great coach. He gets the most out of his players, and again, it didn't end great at Stanford, but in his first 6, 7, 8 years at Stanford, things were rolling. They were winning 9, 10, 11, 12 games a season. They were going to Rose Bowls. They were going to, some really, really big BCS bowls. They were winning big games in big moments. And that is a lot to do with Coach Shaw. And their recruiting went downhill, and Coach Shaw, eventually left the program. But I don't think that takes away from his passing philosophies. I don't think that takes away from what he did with Andrew Luck. That doesn't take away with what he did after Andrew Luck. There were some great years at Stanford, mostly due to the passing attack, and a lot of that had to do with Coach David Shaw. Outside of the hires, some of the promotions and some of the guys they were able to keep were super impressive this year as well. The Detroit Lions were able to keep Mark Brunell as the quarterbacks coach, who has seen Jared Goff through some of the best years of his NFL career. They were able to keep offensive line coach Hank Fraley, who was the best offensive line coach in football, who got an upgraded promotion to run game coordinator as well. He will work very closely with John Morton and David Shaw to man this offense and get it ready for Sundays. They had so many good coaches get retained. They They had a lot of good coaches come in from outside the building. And this coaching staff is not only set to win games next year, I actually think they'll be better. And I know that was the hook for the video, and I know that's what I've already said, but I do think that. I think that even though the Lions lost their offensive coordinator, they lost their defensive coordinator, they lost their defensive lines coach, they lost their pass game coordinator, they lost assistant coaches, they lost positional coaches. I think the Detroit Lions come into this year just as good as they were a season ago. I think a more veteran coaching staff. I think a coaching staff that has won championships, a coaching staff that has won divisions, a coaching staff that has won Super Bowls and national championships and Rose Bowls and, all these different levels of college football and professional football. All of that experience coming together for Detroit can only be a good thing. So, with that being said, that is all I have for you guys today. I was asked about the coaching staff by a couple of people. I wanted to put out a quick video just kind of talking about it. This coaching staff's really good. This coaching staff is not only good, it is, just as good as it was a season ago. And Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes did a phenomenal job putting this coaching staff together. And I'm very excited to see where it goes in 2025. But with all that being said, that's all I got for you guys right now. Let me know down in the comments below your expectations for this coaching staff. I'm really excited to hear what you guys have to say. And I really want to know, do you think the coaching staff can be just as good? Do you think the coaching staff can even take a step forward from where they were a season ago? Let me know down in the comments. But with all that being said, that's all I got for you guys right now. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. It helps the channel out a ton. But thank you all so much for watching. And until next time, and as always, go Lions.